Welcome to the Inside the Criminal World channel. Have you ever wondered how murderers commit their crime?
Help me!
What happens to the victims before they die?
No!
What drives them to kill? Or what is the criminal psyche like before and after a murder? Perhaps you're curious about how police investigations work. Join us at Inside the Criminal World, where we'll bring you in-depth details about cases, insights into criminal psychology, and even let you step into the shoes of a serial killer. We're here for you. Stay with us as we uncover the mysteries behind these cases. True Crime Stories, a journey into the heart of Inside the Criminal World. In the darkest corners of human history, where every crumbling cobblestone and shadowed alley hides a secret, there exists a realm of crime that defies conventional understanding, a realm where truth is stranger and far more brutal than fiction. True crime stories are not merely accounts of crimes, they are intricate tapestries woven from the threads of raw human emotion, twisted psychology, and unyielding darkness. On Inside the Criminal World, we dive deep into these narratives to uncover the hidden truths behind some of the most shocking and macabre crimes ever committed. Picture this: an ancient city like Krakow, with its Gothic spires, storied streets, and centuries-old architecture, once resonated with the hum of life and history. Yet, under the cover of night, this city became the stage for unspeakable acts of brutality and terror that left scars on the soul of the community. The stories we share here are not for the faint of heart. They reveal the sinister details behind crimes that shook entire neighborhoods and changed lives forever. Imagine walking down a narrow, fog-laden alley where each step echoes with the memories of a past drenched in blood. Every broken window, every splintered door, whispers a tale of violence, where perpetrators transformed simple acts of murder into orchestrated masterpieces of terror. These true crime stories expose how cold-blooded killers meticulously planned each move, leaving behind a trail of devastation that can still be felt in the very air of the city. Our journey today will take you back to those harrowing nights when the Bloody Brotherhood ruled the streets, a notorious gang whose deeds of unspeakable cruelty have become the stuff of legends. Led by the merciless Vladimir Drakov and joined by his dark cohorts, Mordecai Volkov and Nikolai Svarog, their reign of terror not only sent shockwaves through Krakow but also challenged the very limits of human depravity. With precision and a twisted sense of artistry, they carved their brutal signature into the history of the city, their every act documented in horrifying detail. Each cut, each scream, and every droplet of blood that fell was a note in their grotesque symphony of destruction. Within our true crime stories, you'll witness scenes so visceral that they will force you to confront the depths of human darkness. We describe, with unnerving clarity, the moment when the fiend struck, how Mordecai's blade sliced through flesh with the precision of a master craftsman, leaving gashes so deep they seemed to map the very soul of his victim. Imagine the harrowing sound of tearing flesh, the sickening wetness of blood as it pooled on cold stone, and the final, chilling silence that followed, a silence that spoke louder than any scream ever could. Not only do we delve into the violence itself, but we also explore the twisted psychology behind these crimes. What drives a person to such extremes? Is it a warped sense of power, an insatiable hunger for control, or simply the darkness inherent in the human heart? As we peel back the layers of these true crime stories, we reveal the disturbing motivations and intricate plans behind each act of horror, inviting you to ask, could such darkness exist within any of us? For those who crave the raw, unfiltered truth of criminal history, Inside the Criminal World is your portal to a realm where every detail matters. We dissect the crimes with a forensic precision, examining the angles of each stab wound, the patterns of blood spatters, and the horrifying satisfaction evident in the killer's eyes when they hear the metallic tang of blood. Our videos not only recount the events but also analyze them, presenting a comprehensive picture of a world where the boundary between life and death is shattered by the acts of those who revel in carnage. And let's not forget the aftermath, a crucial part of these true crime stories. In the wake of the bloodied Brotherhood's reign, Krakow was forced to confront the immense scars left behind. The city, once drenched in terror and despair, rallied to reclaim its identity. The brave efforts of law enforcement and community leaders restored order, and slowly, hope began to seep back into every corner of the town. The transformation of Krakow into a model of resilience and renewal stands as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the darkest of tragedies. Today, as you watch our video, prepare to embark on a journey that not only exposes the shocking details of these crimes but also illuminates the power of justice and unity. Every true crime story we share is a reminder that while evil may flourish in the shadows, the light of truth and collective will can ultimately prevail. Before we continue, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. By doing so, you'll ensure that you never miss an update from inside the criminal world, where we bring you new videos every day, each revealing more of the chilling, real-life accounts that lie hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly ordinary world. Our channel is dedicated to those who are fascinated by the raw realities of crime, the details that most fear to confront, yet are essential for understanding the complex tapestry of human behavior. Here, we pull back the curtain on the criminal underworld, laying bare the secrets, the motives, and the aftermath of heinous acts that have forever altered lives. We believe that by examining these true crime stories in all their gruesome detail, we not only honor the memories of the victims but also arm ourselves with knowledge to prevent such atrocities in the future. Imagine the shock and horror when you first hear about the brutal legacy of the bloodied Brotherhood, a gang that left an indelible mark on Krakow. Picture the chaos in the aftermath, the desperate cries of those left behind, and the unyielding determination of a city that refused to succumb to fear. Each story we present is a fragment of a larger narrative, a mosaic of sorrow, vengeance, and redemption that culminates in the ultimate triumph of justice. As you immerse yourself in our videos, you will encounter eyewitness accounts, expert analyses, and raw footage that bring these true crime stories to life. We dive deep into the mind of the murderer, exploring the twisted satisfaction they derived from every kill, the cold precision of a well-placed stab, the haunting echo of a life cut short, and the macabre artistry of each meticulously executed murder. These details, though difficult to endure, are critical to understanding the full scope of the horror that unfolded. Our narrative approach is both cinematic and journalistic. With careful attention to every gruesome detail, we reconstruct each event with a focus on authenticity and an unflinching look at the true nature of evil. We ask the tough questions: how could such brutality exist? What social, psychological, or historical factors converge to create this perfect storm of terror? And most importantly, what lessons can we learn to safeguard our communities against similar threats in the future? For every true crime story we tell, there is also a story of hope, a narrative of a community rising from the ashes of devastation. In Krakow, after the reign of the bloodied Brotherhood, the people fought back. They reclaimed their streets, rebuilt their homes, and restored a sense of normalcy and safety. This transformation, this resurgence of community spirit, serves as a powerful reminder that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, the human spirit can prevail. By watching Inside the Criminal World, you join us in a collective exploration of these complex themes. Our videos are not just a chronicle of horrifying events, they are a call to awareness, a plea for understanding, and an invitation to reflect on the intricate interplay between the forces of good and evil. We encourage you to engage with our content, share your thoughts, and join the conversation about how we can learn from the past to build a better, safer future. So, If you're ready to witness the raw truth behind some of the most shocking true crime stories ever told, subscribe to Inside the Criminal World and click the bell icon. Each new video is a window into the dark recesses of criminality, meticulously researched and presented with the kind of detail that will leave you both horrified and enlightened. Step into our world, where every true crime story is a journey into the heart of darkness, a journey that reveals not only the monstrous nature of some individuals but also the incredible resilience of those who rise above the chaos. Together, we will uncover the secrets, the pain, and ultimately, the hope that shines through even the most harrowing tales of crime. Remember, your subscription and notification bell click are not just gestures, they are a commitment to understanding the profound complexities of our society, to embracing both the darkness and the light, and to ensuring that the lessons of the past pave the way for a safer, more just future. Welcome to Inside the Criminal World. Prepare yourself for an unforgettable journey into the depths of true crime stories, a journey that will challenge your perceptions, ignite your curiosity, and ultimately, remind you that even in our darkest hours, the light of truth and justice can never be extinguished. The Dark City of Shadows. In the deep recesses of Eastern Europe, where history and modernity collide in a perpetual dance of beauty and decay, there exists a city where shadows speak in whispers and the echoes of the past leave scars on every cobblestone. Krakow, an ancient city known for its Gothic architecture and storied past, became the stage for a horror that defied the natural order. Under the oppressive weight of a moonless night, the city's narrow alleys and crumbling facades bore silent witness to an act of depravity that would forever alter its legacy. It was on such a night that Vladimir Drakov began his relentless descent into madness. Born into a world of darkness and raised amidst the oppressive gloom of a decaying industrial district on the outskirts of Krakow, Vladimir had long been drawn to the macabre. His reputation among the few who whispered his name in hushed tones was that of a man possessed, a killer whose actions were as meticulously calculated as they were monstrously violent. He was a specter in the night, moving with an unsettling grace that belied the horror he wrought. On this particular night, the damp chill of autumn hung heavy in the air. The ancient streets of Krakow, lit sporadically by flickering street lamps, took on an almost otherworldly quality, as if the city itself were mourning. Along the banks of the Vistula River, a waterway that had borne silent witness to countless tragedies over the centuries, a sense of foreboding pervaded. It was here, in an isolated stretch near the old district of Kazimierz, that Vladimir's dark intentions would soon come to fruition. As the clock neared midnight, Vladimir emerged from the obscurity of a narrow, deserted street. He was dressed in a long, weathered overcoat that swallowed his lean frame, his eyes cold and unyielding beneath the brim of a battered hat. His every movement was deliberate, his steps echoing on the ancient cobblestones as if marking the prelude to a grim performance. The city around him seemed to hold its breath, even the restless winds that rustled through the overhanging trees paused in reverence for the impending darkness. Vladimir's destination was a secluded alley that wound its way between crumbling tenements and forgotten storefronts. This alley, known to the locals as Sicha, the silent street, was notorious for its melancholic aura, a place where secrets festered and the boundary between life and death blurred. It was here that Katarzyna Zawada, a young woman of fragile beauty and quiet sorrow, had been spotted earlier that evening. She was a resident of Krakow's Old Town, living in a modest apartment near the main market square, a place that still resonated with the echoes of centuries past. Katarzyna had always been a symbol of delicate resilience amidst the harsh realities of urban life. With her soft, expressive eyes and a gentle smile that belied the hardships she endured, she had become something of a local enigma. Many who crossed her path sensed an underlying sadness, as if the burdens of a tragic past weighed heavily upon her shoulders. That fateful night, however, her path was destined to converge with that of Vladimir Drakov, setting in motion a chain of events that would cast a long shadow over the city. As Vladimir navigated the labyrinthine alleys of Sichyulica, he recalled with grim satisfaction the meticulous planning that had brought him to this moment. In his twisted mind, every detail was orchestrated to perfection: the isolation of the location, the atmospheric gloom of the ancient district, the very history of Krakow itself, which seemed to breathe a melancholic lament with every gust of wind. He had chosen this place deliberately, knowing that the labyrinth of narrow lanes and crumbling facades offered both anonymity and an eerie stage for his unholy work. At the far end of the alley, beneath the weak glow of a solitary street lamp, Katarzyna stood unaware of the impending nightmare. Her long, dark hair cascaded over a simple, worn coat as she nervously clutched a small leather purse. She had been returning from an evening at a modest cafe in the heart of the old town, a place where the clatter of porcelain and murmured conversations mingled with the soft strains of an old piano. But tonight, her face was drawn and her eyes haunted by a premonition of something amiss. In that moment, the soft patter of her footsteps on the damp pavement was the only sound that dared to break the heavy silence of the night. Vladimir's presence was like an intrusion into a fragile dream. He advanced steadily, his silhouette merging with the oppressive darkness. Every step he took was calculated, as if he were following an unyielding script written in the language of cruelty. As he drew closer, the ambient light flickered and danced upon his angular features, casting shifting shadows that rendered his expression unreadable, at once both alluring and terrifying. For Vladimir, the act he was about to commit was not merely an expression of violent impulse but a perverse art, a twisted performance intended to etch his signature of horror into the annals of time. In his mind, Katarzyna was both muse and canvas, a living embodiment of beauty whose delicate features were to be marred forever by his depraved genius. Every detail mattered: the precise angle of his approach, the measured cadence of his footsteps, the careful calculation of distance that would ensure the act was as seamless as it was brutal. When at last he reached her, the world seemed to pause in a suspended moment of dread. The silence was palpable, broken only by the soft, almost imperceptible hum of the distant city and the gentle rustling of leaves in the cool autumn breeze. Katarzyna's eyes, wide with a fleeting spark of hope at the sight of a passerby, met Vladimir's gaze, a gaze devoid of any semblance of empathy, cold and resolute like a slab of ice. In that brief encounter, the forces of light and darkness collided, setting the stage for an act of unspeakable horror. Vladimir extended his hand slowly, as though savoring the moment before the inevitable descent into madness. His fingers, long and calloused from years of hidden violence, brushed against her cheek in a motion that was both disturbingly tender and horrifyingly deliberate. The contact was electric, a fusion of fear and fatal inevitability that sent a chill racing down Katarzyna's spine. For an agonizing moment, her eyes searched his face for any hint of humanity, but found only an abyss of indifference. Time itself seemed to warp as Vladimir's hand closed around her delicate throat. The soft murmur of the city faded into a dissonant silence, punctuated only by the sound of her stifled gasp, a gasp that was quickly smothered by the overwhelming grip of his malevolence. In those seconds, every heartbeat resonated like a final drum, heralding the tragic climax of a destiny written in blood and sorrow. The cold steel of Vladimir's determination was juxtaposed against the fragile warmth of Katarzyna's life. As he enacted his grim ritual, every movement was choreographed with macabre precision. His other hand, concealed in the shadows of his coat, produced a small, wickedly sharp blade, a tool that had become an extension of his will, an instrument for sculpting his perverse masterpiece. With a single, deliberate stroke, he began to carve a path into her flesh, each cut measured and exact, as though he were both erasing her identity and inscribing his dark signature upon her very skin. The scene, set against the backdrop of the ancient, hallowed streets of Krakow, took on an almost surreal quality. The interplay of moonlight and shadow painted the alley in a stark chiaroscuro, where every droplet of rain, every shimmer of reflected light, seemed to accentuate the horror unfolding before unseen eyes. The old buildings, with their faded grandeur and time-worn facades, bore silent witness to the brutality, a silent chorus of centuries-old ghosts that might have once witnessed similar tragedies in eras long past. In that moment, Vladimir was transformed. No longer merely a man, he became an avenging force, an entity driven by a darkness that defied comprehension. His eyes, reflecting the dim light of the distant city, shone with a fervor that bordered on madness. Every cut, every precise incision, was executed with a surgical coldness that was both mesmerizing and deeply horrifying. It was as if he were meticulously peeling away layers of humanity to reveal something primordial and monstrous beneath. Katarzina's world, once filled with the quiet routines of everyday life in the vibrant, albeit troubled, city of Krakow, was abruptly reduced to a vortex of agony and despair. Her soft protests were swallowed by the cacophony of the night, a night that seemed determined to hide the brutal truth from the rest of the world. The blood that began to flow was as dark as the ink of ancient manuscripts, staining her once pale skin with the irrevocable mark of violence. Each drop, glistening in the weak light of the street lamp, narrated a tale of suffering, a tale that would soon become part of the dark lore of this cursed city. Even as Vladimir worked with an unyielding focus, a part of him reveled in the artistry of his deed. In his twisted mind, the act was a form of expression, a way to capture the transient beauty of life even as he destroyed it. The deliberate precision of his movements was akin to a maestro conducting a symphony of despair, each note resonating with the unspoken tragedy of lost innocence. In those agonizing moments, the boundary between creator and destroyer blurred, leaving behind only a raw and unadulterated manifestation of pure, unrestrained brutality. The alley, once a mere passageway in the ancient heart of Krakow, was now transformed into a macabre stage. The wet cobblestones, slick with rain and blood, reflected a mosaic of images, a tragic interplay of light and darkness that bore silent testimony to the horror enacted upon them. Far above, the old church steeples and crumbling facades of centuries-old buildings loomed like spectral guardians, their solemn faces carved in stone bearing witness to yet another soul irrevocably claimed by the night. Vladimir's work was not yet complete. With the same ruthless determination that had driven him thus far, he began to methodically remove the vestiges of identity that remained on Katarzina's delicate form. The process was both methodical and terrifying, a final, grotesque act meant to obliterate the memory of who she once was, replacing it with a monstrous emblem of his own making. The finality of his actions was underscored by the relentless ticking of an unseen clock, marking each heartbeat as a countdown to a fate that could not be undone. Outside the confines of that forsaken alley, Krakow continued its indifferent slumber. In the distance, the gentle hum of a tram and the distant murmur of late-night conversations blended with the whispering winds, a reminder that life, in all its mundane beauty, continued unabated even as unspeakable horrors unfolded in its hidden corners. The city, with its layers of history and cultural memory, bore the weight of countless tragedies, each one etched into its soul. Tonight, another chapter of that dark legacy was being written, a chapter that would forever stain the annals of its storied past. As the final vestiges of life ebbed from Katarzina, Vladimir lingered for a moment in the aftermath. The silence that enveloped the alley was profound, a silence heavy with regret, sorrow, and the grim satisfaction of a deed completed. In that silence, the ghostly echoes of centuries past seemed to rise from the very stones beneath him, murmuring secrets of lost souls and shattered destinies. Vladimir's eyes, unblinking and devoid of remorse, scanned the scene with an almost clinical detachment. In his mind, there was no room for pity or remorse, only the cold, unyielding logic of his dark vision. For Vladimir Drakov, the act of annihilating Katarzyna Zawada was more than a single moment of violence. It was a culmination of years of festering darkness, an act that was meant to redefine his own existence and leave an indelible mark upon a world he viewed as inherently flawed. The city of Krakow, with its ancient soul and modern scars, was the perfect canvas for his perverse masterpiece, a canvas upon which he would forever inscribe his signature of cruelty. In the lingering moments of that dreadful night, as the rain continued to wash away the physical remnants of the horror, the true tragedy lay in the silence that followed. The silence that spoke of a world unable to comprehend the depths of human depravity, a silence that would, in time, be punctured only by whispers of the unspeakable. The once vibrant streets of Krakow would eventually awaken to another day, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that had passed in the hidden recesses of its ancient heart. And so, as the distant bells of a centuries-old cathedral began to toll the early hours of the morning, the tale of Vladimir Drakov's monstrous act had been set into motion, a tale that would ripple through the city like a dark undercurrent, seeping into the memories of its inhabitants and forever altering the course of its history. The legacy of that night, etched in the cold, indifferent stones of Krakow, would become a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the haunting persistence of evil. In the days to come, as investigators and local whispers began to piece together the fragments of that terrible night, the city would be forced to confront a truth that was as ancient as it was contemporary, a truth that the line between beauty and horror was all too easily blurred. The tale of Katarzyna Zawada would join the mournful litany of lost souls, while the name Vladimir Drakov would become synonymous with the darkness that defied redemption. Thus, in the dark hours before dawn, as the first pale light crept over the horizon of Krakow, the alley of Syczajulika remained a silent monument to unspeakable depravity, a monument to the cruelty of a man who had, in his own twisted way, captured the essence of a tragic and unforgiving world. In this first part of our narrative, the ancient city of Krakow serves not only as a backdrop but as a living witness to the macabre symphony of Vladimir Drakov's actions, a tapestry woven with the threads of history, sorrow, and the relentless pulse of a city that has seen too much. Every stone, every whisper of wind through its narrow alleys, carries the weight of the past and the promise of stories that are as dark as they are unyielding. As the night gave way to the cold light of dawn, the echoes of that dreadful act lingered, merging with the eternal spirit of Krakow, a city where every shadow tells a story, and every broken life is a testament to the fragility of the human soul. This night of horror would be remembered not only for its immediate cruelty but also for the indelible mark it left upon the collective memory of a people who, despite the beauty of their ancient home, were forever haunted by the specter of evil that sometimes walks unseen among them. The Night of Dread, the alliance of three fiends. The night remained shrouded in an oppressive gloom after the torrential rain had subsided, a time when even nature dared not breathe hope following the unspeakable tragedy. Krakow, that ancient city where history and modernity entwine in a perpetual dance of faded grandeur and relentless sorrow, was about to be engulfed by a new nightmare. After the blood-stained events on Syczajulika, when the darkness intermingled with the soft cries of a fallen victim and the echo of Vladimir Drakov's cold, measured footsteps, the night was far from over, it had only just begun. Within that same darkness, the accomplices of Vladimir emerged like demons summoned from the very depths of hell. Mordecai Volkov and Nikolai Svarog, two fiends whose souls had long been corrupted by the stench of depravity, each carried their own legacy of madness and mutilation. Together with Vladimir, the trio transformed the night in Krakow into a realm of cruelty so extreme that no mortal could have imagined its coming. Mordecai Volkov, whose eyes were as sharp as a blade and who thrived on a perverse delight in the macabre, had been trailing Vladimir for some time. His raspy, whispered laughter and hushed mutterings among the ancient reeds of forgotten alleys signaled that he was ready to join forces with Vladimir, a dark symphony of evil in which every sound was a challenge to humanity. With a cold, chiseled face and jet black hair that merged with the night, Mordecai drifted like a phantom, meticulously noting every detail to transform them into fragments of his own horrific masterpiece. Meanwhile, Nikolai Svarog, whose massive frame recalled a warrior from a bygone era yet concealed an untamed, brutal heart, embodied the raw physicality of merciless violence. With powerful, unyielding hands and an expression that revealed nothing of emotion, Nikolai wielded his strength like a weapon of annihilation, an unstoppable force of destruction. He was the perfect counterbalance to Mordecai's calculated malice, as together they formed a diabolical pair, a union of two sides of the same corrupt coin, their darkness merging into a singular, overwhelming force. That very night, following the blood-soaked horror on Sichyulica that had rendered the air heavy with lament, the three fiends resolved to continue their nightmarish campaign. Their goal was to imprint their mark of unrelenting cruelty upon every hidden corner of the city. They understood that one single night of horror would not suffice. They needed to spread terror, to transform Krakow, the city of art and history, into a domain of relentless agony, where every stone and every wall would whisper tales of ceaseless torment. Autumn had not yet fully surrendered. A bitter wind swept through the ancient streets, carrying the damp scent of fallen leaves and the melancholy of passing time. Every street, every hidden nook, seemed eager to absorb the evil that was about to be unleashed, and that very night, the three agents of destruction emerged as masters of a storm, prepared to sow the seeds of chaos with a passion that defied reason. They began in a part of the city few dared tread, a decrepit district on the outskirts of Krakow, where buildings crumbled under the weight of neglect, and abandoned homes echoed with the lamentations of a lost past. Here, beneath the weak glow of flickering street lamps, the trio embodiments of pure malevolence hid in the shadows of narrow alleys, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Mordecai led the way, his piercing gaze scrutinizing every detail of the desolate area, from the cracks on the walls, to scattered fragments of paper along the roadside, to patches of moss clinging desperately to ancient bricks. He moved with a silent, assured grace, as if intimately familiar with the broken lives that once thrived here. "Everything is so effortless," he murmured in a tone that was both melancholic and mocking, as if the very echoes of the forsaken souls whispered back in approval, "Just a touch of chaos, and everything becomes magnificent." Beside him, Vladimir still bore the remnants of the previous night's nightmare. His eyes, dark and calculating, roamed the surroundings as if seeking remnants of memory to meld into his new tapestry of horror. "We need a stage grander than this," he declared with a voice as cold and scornful as ice, "one that will leave an indelible mark, a wound that no one will ever forget." Nikolai stepped forward with a heavy, deliberate stride, his gait resonating like the beat of a war drum. "It is time to show our true might," he roared, his voice echoing like thunder across the deserted streets, "so that none shall ever forget that in the dark, evil reigns supreme." Together, the three fiends advanced into the heart of an aged neighborhood, where narrow streets and decaying structures formed a perfect setting for their brutal endeavors. They halted before an abandoned house, its windows shattered, its wooden doors hanging limply as if in silent protest. The atmosphere here was almost tangible, a stifling weight of despair and decay that pervaded every corner. In that oppressive silence, the trio could almost feel the presence of the dead, whispering secrets of lost lives and unspoken tragedies. Mordecai gently extended his hand and pushed open the creaking door, stepping into the murky interior. Inside, The room was lit only by the weak, flickering flames of a few dying candles, their glow dancing eerily over walls scarred by time. The space was suffused with a stifling mix of mold and rust, a setting where the ghosts of bygone days seemed to lurk in every shadow. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing in unison with the silent memories of those who had once inhabited this forsaken place. In the main room, atop an old wooden table, lay scattered fragments of torn paper letters that had never been sent, confessions penned in anguish, and unsent apologies of a life resigned to sorrow. Vladimir, his eyes burning with manic intensity, began to search through these relics, as if seeking the remnants of a past that could fuel his next diabolical creation. "We will ensure that tonight's horror is etched into the annals of the city," he declared, his voice a blend of cold determination and venomous glee, "so that every soul, every heart in this wretched place, will know the anguish of this moment." Nikolai moved forward, brandishing an old, heavy sledgehammer, his chosen instrument of physical devastation. "Let me show you the true might of our evil," he bellowed, his voice reverberating off the peeling walls as he brought down his weapon with a force that shattered the stillness. In that instant, the sound of metal striking wood became a war cry from the depths of hell, as if even the heavens shuddered in response. For a moment, the three fiends fused into a single monstrous entity, a dark triad orchestrating a symphony of brutality, each action a meticulously choreographed stroke on a canvas of horror. They launched their assault with a ferocity that defied description. Mordecai wielded his razor-sharp knife, slashing through the fragile remnants of the past, leaving intricate, deliberate cuts on scraps of paper as if writing a testament of blood and despair upon the very walls. Meanwhile, Vladimir, with his impassive, cold hands, began to erase the vestiges of life from those desperate relics, as though he sought to obliterate every trace of hope and memory. His touch was clinical, his precision that of a master sculptor carving a grotesque masterpiece. Nikolai, ever the enforcer, struck with his sledgehammer, obliterating everything in his path, smashing down decrepit doors, shattering ancient mirrors, and reducing once proud relics to mere shards of their former selves. The sound of his blows, a cacophony of destruction mixed with the sinister whispers of torn paper and the stifled sobs that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Each impact, each cry of splintering wood, resonated like a declaration of unadulterated, remorseless cruelty. Outside the crumbling house, Krakow remained blissfully ignorant of the malevolent spectacle unfolding in its hidden depths. The narrow lanes, the time-worn alleyways, and even the weathered facades of ancient buildings seemed to share in the horror, as if every stone and every brick absorbed the despair. Every footstep of the fiends, every resounding blow of Nikolai's sledgehammer, reverberated as a dire proclamation: no one, not even the most fragile soul, could escape the crushing weight of sin and destruction. Amidst this overwhelming chaos, Mordecai suddenly halted before a venerable old wall, a wall scarred by the indelible marks of past tragedies, its surface still bearing the faded imprints of words written in dark, sinister ink. "Let us carve another chapter into the chronicle of our cruelty," he whispered, his voice rising from the depths of infernal torment, "so that in time, whenever our names are uttered, they will be met with terror and revulsion." Vladimir responded with a cold, twisted smile, his eyes burning with a ferocious red intensity that spoke of madness. "We shall ignite a fury so fierce, the city itself will tremble in its wake," he intoned in a voice devoid of pity, "and every stone, every crumbling wall shall serve as a grim reminder that when evil awakens, it devours all in its path." Without waiting for further consent, Nikolai swung his sledgehammer again, this time crashing it into the ancient wall with such force that fragments exploded outward like shards of broken destiny. The echo of his strike resonated through the desolate district, the disjointed symphony of smashing stone and splintering wood creating an almost unbearable dirge of obliteration. In that moment, the weak light of the solitary street lamp caught on the flying debris, crafting a macabre mosaic of blood-red sparks against a backdrop of perpetual night. The horrifying spectacle intensified as the three fiends synchronized their acts of savagery with the precision of a well-rehearsed, nightmarish orchestra. Mordecai's knife danced across surfaces, etching in relentless strokes the vile secrets of a corrupted soul. Vladimir methodically gathered the tattered remnants of memory, as if to fuse them into a new emblem of his monstrous vision, while Nikolai, with unyielding brutality, turned every obstacle into an instrument of annihilation. The sounds that emerged were not those of a simple act of violence, but of a cataclysm, a roaring symphony of ripping fabric, shattering glass, and the anguished cries of the unseen. Every note, every strike of the blade and blow of the hammer, resonated with an intensity that compelled the heart to contract in overwhelming horror, as though even the faintest breath was laden with the weight of 1,000 sorrows. In the midst of the bedlam, the combination of Mordecai's malicious glee and Nikolai's unbridled force created an atmosphere so thick with revulsion and repulsion that one could almost taste the iron tang of blood mixed with despair. They moved together like two sides of the same cursed coin, one, a master of meticulous, unrelenting cruelty, the other, an unstoppable force of raw destruction. Their unholy alliance elevated the carnage to a level of atrocity that transcended mere mortal depravity. It became a living, breathing testament to the triumph of malevolence over all that is pure. Outside, the city of Krakow, its narrow streets, ancient courtyards, and venerable facades stood unwittingly as the backdrop for this unspeakable horror. Every stone, every crumbling wall, bore silent witness to the unfolding nightmare, as if the very fabric of the city absorbed the shock of each act of barbarity. The sound of their rampage, echoing through desolate alleyways and reverberating off centuries-old edifices, became a mournful dirge, a reminder that when darkness unites, it leaves nothing but devastation in its wake. Time seemed to stretch infinitely during those ghastly hours, as the trio of fiends carved their mark upon not just the walls of an abandoned house but upon the very soul of Krakow. The lingering scent of blood and decay merged with the chill of autumn air, and the once familiar sounds of the city, whispers of life, murmurs of routine, were drowned beneath the overwhelming cacophony of cruelty. Every sound, every flicker of light, was transformed into a reminder of that night's unfathomable horror, a night that would forever be etched into the collective memory of the city's inhabitants. Mordecai, Nikolai, and Vladimir moved as one dark force, their actions fueled by an insatiable hunger to spread terror and despair. They knew that this was only the beginning. A single night of unmitigated atrocity would be insufficient. Their twisted ambition demanded that Krakow itself be transformed into a living canvas of horror, where every corner and crevice would serve as a testament to their unholy collaboration. They would sow the seeds of terror so that even as the city awakened to another day, an indelible stain of evil would remain. As dawn approached and the first pale glimmers of morning light began to seep through the cracked windows of the forsaken building, the fiends paused. In the midst of their rampage, a heavy silence fell, a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the echoes of their brutality. For a moment, the three figures stood amid the shattered remnants of their carnage, their expressions fixed in a grim tableau of victory and utter nihilism. The derelict house, now a ruin of splintered wood, shattered glass, and blood-stained relics, served as a monument to their unspeakable acts. In that heavy silence, Mordecai softly murmured words that sent shivers through the darkness. "Let us engrave this night into history, so that when our names are spoken in fear, no one will dare to defy the wrath of our creation." Vladimir's lips curled into a cold, twisted smile as he replied, "We shall ignite an inferno of terror in the city. Every stone, every wall, every whisper of the past will tremble before our mark." Nikolai, his face an implacable mask of brutality, merely grunted in affirmation, his massive hands still stained with the indelible proof of their shared malice. Then, as if summoned by the very depths of their depravity, the three fiends exited the ruined house and vanished into the labyrinthine alleys of Krakow. They left behind a trail of ruin and despair, a calling card of unspeakable horror that would forever haunt the ancient streets of the city. In every alleyway, every crumbling facade, the memory of that night of Mordecai Volkov, Nikolai Svarog, and Vladimir Drakov would be etched as a reminder of a darkness that can never be eradicated. As the morning light grew stronger, the city began to stir from its uneasy slumber. Unaware of the monstrous deeds committed in its shadowed corners, the people of Krakow resumed their daily lives, while the echoes of that dreadful night lingered like a curse over the ancient city. The once proud edifices, which had withstood the test of time, now bore the invisible scars of that unspeakable terror, their cold walls silently mourning the loss of innocence and the triumph of a cruelty that defied all reason. In the days that followed, as investigators slowly began to piece together the fragments of that horrific night, Krakow found itself forced to confront a truth so unbearable that it threatened to shatter the very fabric of its existence. The names Mordecai Volkov, Nikolai Svarog, and Vladimir Drakov would soon become synonymous with an evil so profound that every mention of them evoked shudders and whispered curses. The legacy of that night, a night of unbridled brutality and unrelenting malevolence, would echo through the centuries as a dire warning, a testament to the fact that, in the heart of every city, even one as storied as Krakow, there lies a darkness waiting for its moment to rise. And so, as the first rays of dawn bathed the ancient streets in a soft, sorrowful light, the haunting memories of that night of dread were woven into the tapestry of Krakow's history, a history marked by beauty and pain, hope and despair. The ruined remnants of the abandoned house, the scattered fragments of paper stained with blood and regret, and the lingering silence of an alley that once echoed with screams would all serve as eternal reminders of a night when three fiends united to unleash an inferno of terror that would haunt the city for generations. In every whispered recounting of that nightmare, in every tear shed for the lives lost to unbridled cruelty, the chilling truth remained: evil, once awakened, can never be completely extinguished. It will always lurk in the hidden corners of the heart, waiting for the opportune moment to rise again, to transform the everyday into an unending horror. And on that fateful night, the combined malice of Mordecai, Nikolai, and Vladimir had done nothing less than irrevocably alter the destiny of Krakow, leaving behind a legacy of despair, revulsion, and an enduring, unyielding reminder that the darkness within man is both boundless and eternal. The final reckoning, the bloodied Brotherhood's rampage. The city's underbelly had long been a breeding ground for unspeakable depravity, but on that fateful night, darkness itself seemed to coalesce into a living, breathing terror. In the cold, unforgiving hours before dawn, as Krakow's ancient streets lay shrouded in mist and regret, an elite band of assassins whose reputation was whispered only in the trembling tones of those too terrified to speak its name gathered with their closest allies, Mordecai Volkov and Nikolai Svarog, to unleash a new wave of carnage. They called themselves the Bloodied Brotherhood, and they were about to etch their legacy into the very fabric of the city's soul. The target was a group of rival enforcers, a cadre of men who had dared to question the unchallenged dominance of the Brotherhood in the city's criminal underworld. Rumors had circulated through the dark alleys and abandoned warehouses of Krakow that these dissenters were plotting to usurp the ancient order, a move that could tip the scales of power and endanger the Brotherhood's rule. For the Bloodied Brotherhood, such treachery was unforgivable. Tonight, they would make an example so grotesque and so ferociously brutal that every soul in Krakow would remember, there was no mercy in the realm of true evil. The night was bitterly cold. Rain had fallen in relentless sheets for hours, turning every cobblestone into a slick mirror reflecting flickering neon lights and the shattered hopes of the city. Under the wan glow of dying street lamps, the Brotherhood converged at a desolate industrial complex on the outskirts of Krakow, a place where time had long ceased to care about the living, and only the echoes of suffering remained. Here, the group of renegade enforcers had taken refuge, ignorant of the storm that was about to descend upon them. Mordecai Volkov led the charge with his characteristic predatory precision. His eyes, cold and gleaming with a deranged delight, swept over the gathering of targets with an intensity that cut deeper than any knife. Every detail, each tremor of a lip, every bead of sweat sliding down a forearm was noted with a satisfaction that bordered on ecstasy. He moved like a phantom through the rain, his slender, lethal blade already glinting in the sparse light as though eager for its next symphony of bloodshed. Beside him, Nikolai Svarog advanced with the raw, unbridled force of a juggernaut. His massive frame, draped in a heavy, tattered coat, seemed to dominate the narrow passageways of the abandoned factory. Every step he took sent tremors through the ground, each footfall punctuating the silence with the promise of unrelenting violence. In his hand, he clutched a monstrous sledgehammer, a brutal extension of his will, forged in the fires of countless battles. Nikolai's face was an unreadable mask of savage determination. There was no flicker of hesitation in his eyes, only the cold certainty that tonight, nothing would stand in his way. Vladimir Drakov, the mastermind of the Bloodied Brotherhood's previous atrocities, shadowed his cohorts with a calm, calculating menace. His presence was like a black void into which any hope would be inexorably sucked. Though his features betrayed little emotion, his eyes burned with an inner fire of feverish, almost artistic zeal for destruction. Tonight, he would once again orchestrate horror with the precision of a maestro, ensuring that every act of brutality served his grand, perverse vision. The complex itself was a labyrinth of decaying corridors and cavernous rooms, its walls stained by decades of neglect and the silent screams of those who once inhabited it. As the Brotherhood crept closer to their target's hideout, the atmosphere became palpably heavy, a suffocating miasma of damp rot, rust, and the lingering stench of fear. Shadows leapt and danced in the corners, as if the very building were alive with the ghosts of its grim past. Inside one such chamber, the unsuspecting rival enforcers had gathered. They huddled around a makeshift table strewn with maps, weapons, and crude plans for seizing control. Their laughter was low and conspiratorial, a brittle veneer masking their mounting apprehension. They believed themselves secure, hidden away from the prying eyes of the city's underworld. They did not know that beyond the peeling metal door, the Bloodied Brotherhood was about to shatter their illusion of safety with a storm of unmitigated violence. With a signal exchanged in glances and barely audible murmurs, the assault began. In a flurry of premeditated ferocity, Mordecai surged forward. His blade moved with deadly grace, slicing through the air and then through flesh as if it were nothing more than paper. The first of the enforcers barely had time to register the shock of the attack before Mordecai's knife found its mark, a precise, ruthless incision that drew a spurt of crimson in the dim light. The sound of a body collapsing to the cold, concrete floor was swallowed by the relentless pounding of rain and the echo of footsteps. Nikolai was a force of nature. He crashed through the narrow doorway with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. With each devastating swing of his sledgehammer, walls splintered and bones cracked. The brutal impact of his blows sent shockwaves through the room, disorienting his foes and reducing their feeble attempts at resistance to pitiful, scattered struggles. The cacophony of destruction, the high-pitched whine of metal against stone, the sickening thud of impact, and the ragged gasps of dying men merged into a symphony of terror that seemed orchestrated by the hand of fate itself. Vladimir moved with an eerie, methodical calm amid the chaos. While his comrades unleashed their fury, he prowled through the shadows, his eyes fixed on the targets who managed to stagger away from the initial onslaught. Every step he took was measured, every movement deliberate. He approached one particularly defiant adversary, a man whose face was twisted in a mask of fear and incredulity, and without a word, he drew a long, slender blade from beneath his coat. In a series of swift, almost balletic movements, Vladimir dispatched his victim with a single, merciless strike. The sound of slicing flesh and the subsequent, pitiful gasp of life was music to his dark soul. To him, this was not mere murder, it was the final brush stroke on a masterpiece of terror. As the assault progressed, the room became a theater of unspeakable horror. Bodies lay strewn across the floor, their blood pooling into dark, obscene shapes that glistened under the meager light. The air was filled with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid odor of fear. Each blow struck, each cut made, was exaggerated by the heavy rain pounding against broken windows, as if nature itself joined in the macabre dance of violence. Mordecai, his face set in a grim, almost rapturous expression, continued to carve his signature of cruelty. He moved through the chaos like a phantom, his knife flashing in and out as he dismembered those who attempted to flee. His actions were so ferocious that even the most hardened criminals among the rival enforcers recoiled in abject terror. With every slash, he seemed to etch a new chapter in the annals of the bloodied brotherhood, a chapter that would forever stain the history of Krakow. Nikolai's rampage was equally unstoppable. His sledgehammer became an instrument of pure, unadulterated rage as he brought it down again and again upon any who dared to stand in his path. The force of his blows was almost supernatural. Each impact sent a shudder through the very walls of the decaying complex. He was like a one-man wrecking ball, reducing everything in his wake to rubble and ruin. The deafening sound of destruction, punctuated by the screams of the injured and the dying, formed a dreadful chorus that resonated with the heartbeat of the night. Vladimir, meanwhile, navigated the maelstrom with an unsettling serenity. He selected his victims with the care of an artist choosing a canvas. One moment, he would appear behind a toppled table, his cold eyes locking onto a man desperately scrambling for cover. The next, he would be there, delivering a swift, lethal cut that ended the man's futile resistance. His every movement was deliberate and imbued with a calm that was more terrifying than the chaos around him. To witness Vladimir's efficiency was to understand that he did not kill out of impulse, but rather to fulfill a meticulously crafted vision of absolute annihilation. The relentless assault continued for what felt like an eternity, with each moment drawn out in excruciating detail. The room was bathed in the sickly light of emergency lamps and the intermittent flashes of lightning from a storm raging outside. Shadows danced grotesquely across the walls, their forms twisting into shapes that seemed to mock the last vestiges of humanity. Every surface was smeared with the remnants of shattered lives, every inch of space saturated with the unbearable stench of death and decay. At one point, as the rain hammered down on the ruined building, a rival enforcer, his face contorted in terror, attempted to rally his remaining comrades. He shouted incoherent orders, pleading for mercy, as he clutched at his mangled limbs. His voice, hoarse and ragged, was abruptly cut off when Mordecai appeared in a blur of motion, his knife plunging into the man's throat with a final, silent precision. The resulting spray of blood painted the nearby walls with a macabre red that, under the flickering light, resembled a ghastly work of art. In that moment, the assault reached a crescendo, a climax of unrestrained brutality that left no doubt as to the dominion of the bloodied brotherhood. Even as the violence reached its apex, there were moments when the sheer intensity of the carnage seemed almost surreal. Nikolai, pausing only briefly to survey the ruin he had wrought, bellowed a guttural cry that echoed off the shattered glass and battered walls. It was a cry that spoke not only of triumph but of a deep, primal satisfaction, a recognition that the darkness they embodied was an unstoppable force that no mortal could defy. In the eyes of the attackers, there was a twisted ecstasy in the act of subjugation, a perverse pleasure derived from the complete and utter annihilation of those who dared to oppose them. The scene outside the ruined hideout was equally grim. As the echoes of violence reverberated through the deserted industrial district, the rain continued to fall like a ceaseless lament for the lives cut short in such an unspeakable manner. The few remaining rival enforcers, now broken and scattered, fled into the labyrinthine streets, their anguished cries merging with the sound of distant sirens and the relentless drumming of the storm. Yet, even in their flight, the memory of the bloodied Brotherhood's wrath was indelible, a mark of terror that would haunt them long after the rain had ceased. In the aftermath, as the last echoes of the assault faded into a silence heavy with despair, the interior of the building was transformed into a mausoleum of cruelty. Every surface, every broken shard of glass and splintered piece of wood, bore witness to the night's unspeakable atrocities. The mingled scent of blood, sweat, and decaying matter filled the air, while a pervasive sense of dread settled over the place like a shroud. There was no heroism here, only the raw, unfiltered manifestation of evil in its purest form. The fiends themselves, now briefly pausing amidst the wreckage of their brutal masterpiece, exchanged no words. Their expressions were unreadable masks of cold satisfaction and grim determination. In that charged moment of silence, the true meaning of their actions was laid bare. They were not simply murderers or thugs, they were the embodiment of a darkness that defied the bounds of morality, a force that thrived on the utter obliteration of hope. Mordecai, his face streaked with rain and the crimson evidence of his deeds, broke the silence with a low, chilling murmur. "Let this night be immortal," he said, his voice echoing as though from the depths of a tomb. "Let every soul in this accursed city know that defiance will be met with a fury beyond mortal reckoning." His words, soaked in venom and finality, were met with only the silent, approving nods of his companions. Vladimir's gaze, fixed on the ruined remains of the hideout, shone with a cold, unyielding intensity. "We have carved our names into the annals of darkness tonight," he intoned softly, almost reverently. "May the memory of our wrath burn as an eternal reminder, in the realm of true evil, there is no escape, no redemption." His voice, though calm, carried the weight of an irrevocable decree, a proclamation that the bloodied Brotherhood would forever reign over the hearts of those who dared oppose them. Nikolai, still gripping his sledgehammer as though it were an extension of his own soul, simply grunted in acknowledgement. His eyes, dark and implacable, revealed nothing beyond the stark satisfaction of a duty fulfilled. In his silence, there was a promise, a vow that the path of destruction they had embarked upon would continue, relentless and unstoppable, until every vestige of their enemies was obliterated. And so, as the storm began to relent and the first faint rays of a gray morning crept over the horizon, the Brotherhood withdrew into the labyrinthine streets of Krakow. Their silhouettes melted into the gloom, leaving behind only the ruin of their brutality, a tableau of horror so immense that it would haunt the city for generations to come. The enforcers they had slain, the shattered dreams, and the blood-stained remnants of their lives would form a permanent scar upon the history of Krakow, a reminder that the night belonged to the bloodied Brotherhood, and that their reign of terror was as inexorable as time itself. In the quiet aftermath, as investigators began to piece together the shattered fragments of that night's massacre, a deep, unspoken terror seeped into every corner of the city. Whispers of the fiends' names Mordecai Volkov, Nikolai Svarog, and Vladimir Drakov grew into legends, each retelling more grotesque and chilling than the last. The once proud streets of Krakow, with their ancient stone and storied past, now bore the indelible imprint of a night when the darkness was allowed to speak in a tongue of blood and agony. For those who survived that night, the horror was not confined to the ruins of the hideout or the echoing corridors of the industrial complex. It had followed them into the depths of their very souls. In the dead of night, when silence reigned and the city seemed to hold its breath, the memory of every brutal blow, every scream of agony, resurfaced in vivid detail. Faces in nightmares, voices on the wind, and shadows that moved of their own accord became the legacy of that night, a legacy of revulsion and unending torment. Thus, the bloodied brotherhood had achieved their unholy ambition. They had not only annihilated those who opposed them but had transformed their very act of violence into a work of art, an art so horrific, so overbearing in its malevolence, that it would forever taint the collective memory of Krakow. Their rampage, fueled by a deranged mixture of calculated cruelty and raw, untempered rage, had shattered not only lives but the fragile hope of an entire city. As the sun rose higher and the chill of the night gave way to the uncertain warmth of a new day, Krakow struggled to awaken from its terrible nightmare. The scars of that bloodied night would never fully fade. They would linger in the whispered legends of the streets, in the silent gaze of ancient statues, and in the hearts of those who had borne witness to the unmitigated savagery. And so, as life resumed its precarious rhythm, an undercurrent of dread pulsed beneath the surface, an enduring reminder that evil, once unleashed, can never be entirely vanquished. In the days that followed, as investigators combed through the remnants of the ruined complex and eyewitnesses trembled while recounting their memories, the tale of that night grew into a cautionary myth, a myth that would be passed down through generations. Parents would warn their children of the fiends whose names evoked terror, while the city's elders recalled a time when darkness ruled with an iron fist. The legend of the bloodied brotherhood became a symbol of unrestrained malevolence, a symbol of a world in which the boundaries between the human and the inhuman had been irrevocably shattered. For now, the fiends retreated into the shadows, their work for the night complete, but their promise of further carnage left a malignant seed that would take root in the hearts of those who dared defy them. The chilling silence that followed was a testament to their supremacy, a silence that screamed louder than any battle cry. And as Krakow slowly stirred beneath the weight of its sorrow, one immutable truth remained, that in a city haunted by history and marred by blood, the reign of the bloodied brotherhood was an unending nightmare, a nightmare that would never truly die. Days of desolation, the town descends into a blood abyss. As the storm of terror from that dreadful night finally subsided, the weak morning light could not dispel the lingering gloom that clung to every street of Krakow. But what was to come in the following days was even more unspeakable, a relentless cascade of horror that transformed the entire town into a macabre carnival of death and despair. In the wake of the bloodied brotherhood's initial rampage, the echoes of that night's terror still reverberated across every dark corner. Yet, that night was merely the spark. Over the next several days, the fiends, driven by their unquenchable lust for carnage, set about a calculated series of murders designed to terrorize every soul in the town. They intended to leave no part of Krakow unscarred by their brutality. From the earliest hours of dawn until the late hours of night, the streets were stained with blood and filled with screams. Witnesses described scenes so graphic that each moment seemed to stretch into an eternity of agony. In the town center, once a lively square brimming with cheerful chatter, only the shattered remains of bodies and crimson trails on cold stone remained. One particularly notorious massacre unfolded in the main square, where rival enforcers, hitherto smug in their belief that they could challenge the Brotherhood's supremacy, were ambushed in broad daylight. Mordecai Volkov spearheaded the attack with a predatory speed that left little time for his victims to react. His razor-sharp blade sliced through the air and through flesh with the precision of an artist. With each calculated slash, he etched deep wounds into his victim's exposed skin, leaving behind lacerations that seemed to map out his dark vision. The sound of tearing flesh and collapsing bodies melded with the patter of relentless rain and the echoing thud of footsteps, composing a dreadful symphony of violence. Beside him, Nikolai Svarog was an unstoppable force of raw power. Clad in a tattered coat that barely concealed his hulking frame, he barreled through obstacles like a living wrecking ball. With every mighty swing of his sledgehammer, walls crumbled and bones shattered. The ferocity of his blows sent shockwaves through the room, disorienting his foes and reducing their desperate attempts to resist to pitiful, scattered struggles. The deafening cacophony of shattering wood, splintering glass, and anguished cries created an auditory nightmare, a chorus that testified to the unspeakable cruelty unleashed that day. Meanwhile, Vladimir Drakov moved like a phantom amid the chaos. With cold, emotionless eyes, he stalked his chosen prey with a methodical precision that left no room for mercy. Emerging suddenly from the shadows, he would approach an unsuspecting victim, often someone alone and defenseless, and deliver a swift, lethal stab. The sound of slicing flesh, followed by a stifled gasp, was a perverse delight to him. Every wound he inflicted, every calculated incision, was a meticulous brush stroke on a canvas of pure, unadulterated terror. The assault on the square was only one chapter in a series of brutal events that followed. Over the next several days, the fiend's reign of terror spread like wildfire throughout Krakow. Every public space, every narrow alley, every crumbling facade became a stage for new acts of murderous savagery. In one particularly ghastly incident at the town's bustling night market, a sudden ambush turned a scene of lively commerce into a blood-soaked massacre. Shrieks of terror and agony filled the air as the assassins descended upon the unsuspecting crowd with relentless efficiency. Mordecai's knife danced through the humid air, its arc so swift and precise that it left behind a trail of carnage. He executed each victim with a series of intricate, deliberate cuts, each incision a mark of his deranged artistry. The sight was horrifying. Skin was rent apart with surgical exactness, exposing sinews, tendons, and raw, quivering muscle. Blood gushed forth, pooling on the slick market floor and staining the vibrant fabric of merchant stalls with streaks of deep, vivid red. At the same time, Nikolai's overwhelming strength was on full display. His sledgehammer fell repeatedly with the force of an avalanche, crushing not only the bodies of those who dared resist but also obliterating the very structures around them. His blows shattered not just flesh but also the fragile spirit of the crowd, reducing the once vibrant market to a nightmarish tableau of dismembered limbs and scattered, blood-soaked belongings. The sound of his heavy strikes, echoing off ancient walls, was akin to the roar of an unholy tempest, a relentless proclamation of death. Vladimir, ever the calculating executioner, selected his targets with the cold efficiency of a predator. He emerged from the chaos like a specter, his long, slender blade glinting in the dim light as he dispatched those who attempted to flee. In one harrowing moment, he appeared behind a man who had dropped his weapon in a futile bid for survival. With a single, swift motion, Vladimir plunged his knife deep into the man's throat. The victim's eyes widened in a final, silent plea for mercy as his blood spurted out in a macabre fountain, splattering against nearby walls and pooling in grotesque patterns on the pavement. Throughout these brutal events, one detail remained disturbingly constant: the fiend's insatiable fascination with the scent and sound of blood. To them, every gory detail was a perverse symphony. They reveled in the sickly sweet aroma of spilled blood, finding in its metallic tang a twisted source of ecstasy. The fiend's expressions would sometimes twist into expressions of manic satisfaction as the sound of blood dripping onto cold stone, the squelch of torn flesh, and the gurgling whispers of dying victims washed over them like a drug. For these assassins, the scent of blood was not merely a byproduct of violence, it was the elixir of their depravity, an intoxicating reminder of their absolute dominance over life and death. As the days wore on, the terror did not recede. Instead, the gruesome events grew ever more detailed and methodical. In one harrowing episode, a quiet residential street became the setting for a meticulously orchestrated massacre. A family, enjoying a rare moment of peaceful breakfast, was ambushed as a squad of the fiends descended upon them without warning. In the blink of an eye, the table was overturned, and the tranquil clatter of utensils was replaced by the horrifying cacophony of screams, tearing flesh, and collapsing bodies. The vivid details were too grotesque to ignore: deep, jagged cuts that exposed raw muscle, bones splintering beneath the force of brutal blows, and the unrelenting rush of blood that flowed in a continuous, gruesome stream. In another location, a narrow, dimly lit backstreet, victims were lined up like rag dolls. The fiends took turns displaying their cruelty in full, unsparing detail. Mordecai would meticulously slice into the exposed skin of a man's arm, his blade tracing deliberate, arcing patterns that left behind a tapestry of deep red wounds. Each cut was executed with such precision that the victim's body was soon reduced to a canvas of mangled tissue and exposed bone. The fiends would pause occasionally to savor the moment: the squelching sound of torn flesh, the rhythmic drip of blood that fell onto the concrete floor, each droplet resonating like a note in their macabre melody. Nikolai, meanwhile, unleashed his raw power in waves that obliterated any semblance of life. With each thunderous swing of his sledgehammer, he shattered not only the bodies in his path but also the very fabric of any resistance. His strikes were so ferocious that even the sturdiest structures within the narrow alley seemed to crumble under the relentless assault. The resulting fragments, shards of bone, pieces of shattered wood, and splatters of blood filled the air in a grotesque display of dismemberment. In the midst of this carnage, the fiends' combined efforts created a scenario where the line between deliberate murder and wanton destruction was irretrievably blurred. Amid these relentless scenes of horror, the fiends did not allow any victim the slightest chance of escape. Every scream, every groan of pain, was met with an immediate and merciless response. In one particularly gruesome scene, a lone woman attempting to flee was caught by Vladimir, who, with a cold and emotionless precision, delivered a series of brutal stabs along her back. The resulting wounds were deep and systematic, each one a testament to the fiend's twisted delight in the act of taking life. Her body, left exposed and mangled on the rain-soaked pavement, became a horrifying monument to the fiend's unyielding desire to inflict pain and terror. Over the ensuing days, the entire town of Krakow descended further into despair. Every street, every corner, every building became a silent witness to the unending series of brutal murders. Public spaces that once thrived with life were now haunted by the memories of these unspeakable acts. The pervasive stench of blood, the sound of water dripping onto stained stone, and the perpetual low murmur of terrified whispers formed an omnipresent backdrop, a constant reminder that the fiends were still at large, their bloodlust unsated. The brutality extended even to the smallest details. In one alley, a body was found so mangled that nothing recognizable remained except for a patchwork of torn skin and exposed sinews. The victim's eyes, once windows to a hopeful soul, were now dull and lifeless, their glassy stare a silent testament to the fiend's merciless execution. Every incision, every violent cut, was performed with a level of precision that betrayed not only the savagery of the act but also a disturbing sense of artistry. The fiends, it seemed, viewed each killing not merely as a method of eliminating opposition, but as a macabre performance, a chance to imprint their twisted signature on the very essence of life. For the perpetrators, each act of violence was accompanied by an almost ecstatic rapture. They relished the sounds, the wet squelch of flesh being torn, the splatter of blood against hard surfaces, and the rhythmic patter of crimson droplets hitting cold concrete. In the midst of the carnage, the scent of blood was intoxicating, a pungent, iron-rich aroma that drove them further into madness. Their expressions would contort into twisted smiles as they paused briefly, inhaling deeply as though to capture the very essence of death itself. To them, every note of that brutal symphony was a celebration of their dominance, a reminder that in the world they had chosen, no one was spared from their unholy wrath. In one particularly savage episode, a busy night market was transformed into a scene of unspeakable horror. As unsuspecting vendors and shoppers went about their evening, the fiends struck with the ferocity of a raging tempest. Mordecai's knife flashed in the dim light, carving deep, deliberate gashes along the limbs and torsos of his victims. Nikolai's sledgehammer rained down with destructive force, shattering bones and crushing the very will to resist. Vladimir, ever the silent executioner, moved through the chaos with surgical precision, ending lives with cold, calculated strikes that left behind only silence and devastation. The market, once vibrant with life, became a canvas painted in blood, a living nightmare that would haunt the dreams of all who witnessed it. By now, the entire town was steeped in an atmosphere of terror and revulsion. Every resident, whether hiding in their homes or forced to brave the streets, could not escape the images of mutilated bodies and the unyielding stench of death that pervaded the air. The relentless wave of violence had transformed Krakow into a landscape of horror, where every shattered facade and blood-stained alley told the same grim story, that of a town overrun by unrestrained cruelty. Even as the fiends continued their reign of terror, whispers of hope and resistance began to stir among the survivors. Yet, these fragile embers of defiance were quickly smothered by the overwhelming power of the bloodied Brotherhood's brutality. For every attempt to regroup or escape, the fiends struck back with renewed savagery, their actions more meticulous and horrifically inventive than the last. Every gory detail, from the precise angle of a fatal stab to the exact pattern of blood spatter, was engineered to maximize terror and ensure that the memory of their actions would be indelibly etched into the collective consciousness of the town. Days bled into nights, and the cycle of violence continued unabated. The town's public squares, once filled with life and laughter, now lay barren and echoing with the sorrowful sounds of distant sirens and the perpetual drip of blood onto cold stone. The fiends had succeeded in creating an environment where the very air was heavy with the stench of death, a constant reminder that evil, when united in its darkest form, could transform even the most vibrant of communities into a landscape of despair. For the fiends themselves, every act of violence further fueled their depraved satisfaction. They gathered in secret, sharing in their collective ecstasy as they recounted every detail of the carnage, the sound of tearing flesh, the sight of exposed muscle and bone, and most of all, the overpowering aroma of fresh blood that seemed to imbue them with a near divine power. In those moments, their expressions would shift, becoming wild and almost euphoric, as though each kill was a sacred rite, an offering to the dark gods they worshipped in silence. And so, Krakow, once a proud town rich in history and culture, fell deeper into the abyss of desolation. Every alley, every corner became a testament to the unyielding cruelty of the fiends. The images of stabbings, mutilations, and the naked, blood-soaked remains of those unfortunate enough to cross their path were seared into the minds of the survivors. The town, now shrouded in perpetual mourning, would forever be marked by these atrocities, a scar that no amount of time could heal. As the relentless days of horror wore on, the fiends continued their dark crusade without respite. Their campaign of terror was a meticulously orchestrated display of power and depravity, a series of killings so precise, so brutally executed, that even the most hardened criminals of the underworld trembled in fear. Each scene was a grotesque performance, a raw and unfiltered exposition of murder that laid bare the unthinkable extent of human cruelty. When at last a semblance of quiet returned to the streets, a silence heavy with despair and haunted by memories, the town of Krakow was irrevocably changed. The streets bore witness to a horror that no one could ever erase. Every ruined building, every darkened alley echoed with the remnants of the bloodied Brotherhood's atrocities. And even as life timidly began to stir again, the scent of blood and the memory of savage violence lingered like a malignant fog, a permanent reminder that in the shadowed corners of humanity, true evil still reigns supreme. In the hearts of the fiends, the sound of blood dripping and the sight of mangled bodies became a twisted mantra, a confirmation of their own dark divinity. They embraced the madness, feeding off the terror they had sown, and vowing that their reign would continue until every soul trembled before them. For them, the blood was not only evidence of their kill but the sweetest nectar of their unholy existence, a scent that promised eternal power and the unending thrill of dominance over life and death. And so, as the days of desolation dragged on, Krakow became a town of perpetual mourning, a place where every whispered legend and every shattered memory told the story of a night when darkness devoured hope, and a brutal, unrelenting massacre redefined the limits of human depravity. The fiends had not only claimed countless lives, but they had also imprinted their monstrous legacy upon the very fabric of the town, ensuring that the echoes of their terror would haunt Krakow for generations to come. Dawn of Renewal, the restoration of Krakow. At precisely 8 a.m. on August 25, 1981, the first tender rays of dawn pierced through the oppressive, dark clouds that had long hung over Krakow. The ancient city, once ravaged by unspeakable terror, stood on the cusp of a new era, a time when peace, prosperity, and unwavering security would soon replace the lingering echoes of horror. In the days following the reign of terror wrought by the bloodied Brotherhood, when every street and narrow alley was stained with the memories of blood and anguished cries, the citizens of Krakow had endured unspeakable hardship. Yet even in the midst of such relentless darkness, the indomitable spirit of the people had not been extinguished. That very morning, a historic press conference was held at the venerable town hall in the main square, a square that had, for centuries, symbolized unity and pride for Krakow's people. Standing at the podium, Chief of Police Helena Nowak addressed a hopeful crowd with a firm, resonant voice. Today marks not only the end of a nightmare but the dawn of a new era. We, the people of Krakow, have suffered unimaginable sorrow. Yet, with a steadfast resolve that will never waver, we shall rebuild our city into a shining beacon of peace, prosperity, and unyielding security. Ms. Nowak emphasized that, from that very morning onward, the police and all state authorities had begun working in unison with experts from both home and abroad to launch comprehensive restoration projects. Starting at 10 a.m. today, our engineers and urban planners will begin clearing the main square, erasing every trace of the horror that has marred our city. By noon, our police will initiate a sweeping operation throughout the town to dismantle every remnant of criminal influence and ensure that no act of brutality like this ever recurs, she declared. Her words rippled quickly through the community. Neighborhoods that had once cowered in silent terror began to stir as families emerged from their homes. Women once huddled behind locked doors, their eyes brimming with fear, stepped out with a newfound glimmer of hope. Children, who had long been silenced by the terror of recent days, slowly returned to their innocent games on streets now being cleansed of the remnants of darkness. During the press conference, Ms. Nowak continued, "We understand that the pain of the past will not vanish overnight. That is why we are launching an all-encompassing support program, particularly for women and children, who have borne the greatest burden. Psychological counseling centers, art therapy classes, and family support initiatives will be operational by the end of this week, helping our community to overcome the trauma and to build a brighter future together. Immediately following the conference, at 2 p.m. that same day, a solemn ceremony called the Tree of Hope was held in the main square. Local leaders, community representatives, and members of the security forces gathered to witness the planting of a majestic oak tree, an ancient symbol of life drawn from the royal forests of old. The Tree of Hope was to stand as a living testament that from the ashes of pain and despair, hope can once again take root and flourish in Krakow. As the day unfolded, the restoration efforts gained momentum. On the morning of August 26, 1981, at exactly 10 a.m., teams of engineers and laborers set to work clearing the main square of all remnants of the previous horror. Cranes, bulldozers, and cleaning crews operated tirelessly under the vigilant eyes of patrolling police, ensuring that every public space was restored according to plan. The once oppressive atmosphere gradually gave way to an aura of renewal, and the sound of laughter slowly began to replace the echoes of fearful whispers. Simultaneously, the city's security apparatus was bolstered. Modern surveillance cameras were installed in every corner, additional patrol posts were established, and an updated emergency communication network ensured that every citizen could feel safe. We pledge that no criminal shall ever again exploit the darkness as they did before, Ms. Nowak stated with unwavering determination. In the ensuing days, Krakow's transformation became palpable. Citizens, refusing to allow the past to dictate their future, began to actively participate in community activities. Schools reopened, cultural centers resumed their vibrant programming, and local markets buzzed once more with life. Art performances, community gatherings, and cultural festivals soon emerged as symbols of hope and unity, manifestations of a spirit that refused to succumb to despair. At 7 p.m. on September 25, 1981, a grand ceremony was held in the main square, broadcast live on national television and attended by thousands of citizens, high-ranking officials, and international dignitaries alike. On that memorable evening, the mayor of Krakow, alongside Chief Inspector Nowak and other community leaders, ascended the stage to proclaim, "Tonight, we witness the rebirth of Krakow, a city that has not only endured the horrors of the past but has risen stronger and more vibrant than ever before. Krakow now stands as a symbol of security, prosperity, and unity, where every citizen, especially women and children, may live in peace and happiness." The mayor's stirring speech resonated deeply throughout the square, eliciting a powerful response from the assembled crowd. Applause, cheers, and radiant smiles spread among the people, as if the dark memories of recent days were finally being dispelled by a collective surge of hope. Every word and every plan announced reinforced the promise that Krakow's future would be free from fear and laden with opportunity. Over the subsequent weeks, restoration projects advanced at an impressive pace. Entire districts once marred by devastation were rebuilt from the ground up. New residential areas, commercial centers, and public parks were erected with meticulous care, transforming the physical landscape of the city. The reinforced security measures, along with an increased police presence, ensured that every corner of Krakow was now a bastion of safety. Public spaces previously overshadowed by terror were rejuvenated by the spirit of community, and iconic symbols of renewal such as the Tree of Hope and the mural Phoenix Rising became beacons of resilience, inspiring all who saw them. On March 1, 1982, a major celebration was held at Peace Park, the newly renovated Green Heart of Krakow. Thousands gathered to honor the city's resurgence, sharing in joyous festivities that combined heartfelt remembrances of the past with exuberant anticipation for a brighter future. Poignant speeches, stirring artistic performances, and cultural displays filled the park, affirming that every wound could heal through unity, hope, and the unwavering human spirit. Not content with merely restoring the city's physical form, the government launched a series of comprehensive economic initiatives aimed at revitalizing Krakow's prosperity. Major infrastructure projects were announced, including extensive renovations of historical districts and the construction of cutting-edge facilities to attract business and tourism. Tax incentives, grants for small enterprises, and robust public works programs were set in motion, ensuring that Krakow would not only recover from its recent traumas but emerge as a regional model of growth and development. The message was clear: the era of terror had ended, and a new chapter of hope and progress had begun. As the months passed, Krakow transformed into a vibrant, modern city without losing the charm of its storied past. Every street, once tainted by blood and despair, now shimmered with the promise of renewal. The city's security was unwavering, its infrastructure modernized, and its public spaces replete with laughter and activity. Women, who had once lived in constant fear, now strolled confidently along clean boulevards. Children filled parks with joyful shouts, and the entire community took pride in the rebirth of their beloved city. On December 15, 1982, at precisely 6 p.m., the government hosted a grand celebration at the newly established Square of Unity in the heart of Krakow. The event, broadcast live throughout the nation, attracted thousands of attendees from top government officials to local citizens. During the ceremony, the mayor, accompanied by Chief Inspector Nowak and other dignitaries, declared, "Today, we not only celebrate the rebirth of our city but also affirm our commitment to a future of safety, prosperity, and unity. Krakow has overcome its darkest hours and now stands as a shining beacon of hope and resilience for all." The mayor's heartfelt speech, filled with promises and assurances, was met with overwhelming applause and cheers. Families embraced, neighbors clasped hands, and tears of joy mingled with laughter as the crowd celebrated a new beginning. Fireworks lit up the night sky, their vibrant colors reflecting off the restored facades of historical buildings, as if heralding the dawn of a brighter future over every corner of the city. In the weeks and months that followed, Krakow continued to flourish. Infrastructure projects were completed, modern facilities replaced the scars of the past, and new economic opportunities brought a wave of investment and innovation. Educational, cultural, and recreational programs thrived, ensuring that every citizen could enjoy a high quality of life. The government's support for women and children, through counseling centers, art therapy classes, and community outreach programs, helped heal deep-seated wounds and restore a sense of hope and security. By early 1982, Krakow was officially recognized as one of the safest and most prosperous cities in the region. On January 20, 1982, during a solemn ceremony at the main square, state officials announced the successful completion of the restoration projects. "We have not only rebuilt our physical surroundings but also our collective spirit," declared the mayor, his voice echoing with pride and determination. Today, Krakow stands as a testament to our unity, our resilience, and our unwavering belief in a future free of fear. Our city is now a model of security, prosperity, and community spirit for all. In the following months, the revival of Krakow continued with great momentum. Modernized public transportation systems, rejuvenated parks, and revitalized cultural centers attracted both locals and international visitors. Krakow once again became a vibrant hub of commerce, education, and art, a city where history and modernity coexisted harmoniously. The painful memories of the past, though never entirely erased, were transformed into symbols of resilience, serving as powerful reminders of what can be achieved when a community unites in the face of adversity. On December 31, 1982, as the old year gave way to the new, Krakow celebrated its rebirth in a magnificent New Year's Eve celebration. Under a sky ablaze with dazzling fireworks, the city's restored historical buildings glowed with renewed brilliance. In the grand celebration held at the main square, the Prime Minister of Poland addressed the assembled crowd. Krakow is not merely a city, it is a symbol of hope, unity, and the indomitable human spirit. We honor our past, we commemorate our struggles, and we pledge to build a future that is safe, prosperous, and free of terror. His words, delivered with fervor and passion, resonated deeply with every citizen, reaffirming that the darkness had been conquered. The joyous celebration was a powerful affirmation of Krakow's transformation. Applause, cheers, and heartfelt embraces filled the square as families and communities rejoiced in their newfound safety and optimism. Women cradled their children with pride, and every face shone with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The magnificent display of fireworks, the rhythmic music, and the collective cheers symbolized a resounding victory over the forces of terror, a triumph that had restored not only the city's physical beauty but also its spirit. In the months that followed, the city's leadership continued to work tirelessly to ensure that the dark chapter of the past would serve as a lesson for the future. Investments in education, healthcare, and technology propelled Krakow into a new era of innovation and growth. Local businesses flourished, tourism boomed, and the community, having once been scarred by unspeakable horror, now radiated hope and unity. Every evening, as dusk settled over the city, the citizens of Krakow gathered in their rejuvenated main square to celebrate life. They shared stories of resilience and hope, exchanged smiles, and sang together in a spontaneous chorus of unity. The once terrifying memories of bloodshed and terror had given way to a collective promise of renewal, a promise that no matter how deep the wounds of the past, the spirit of a united community could overcome any adversity. Krakow's journey from darkness to light became an enduring symbol of transformation, a powerful reminder that even in the face of overwhelming horror, hope can be reborn. The capture and punishment of the bloodied Brotherhood, along with the subsequent restoration of the town, were celebrated as triumphs of justice and the unyielding human spirit. The city, once marred by unspeakable atrocities, had emerged as a beacon of security, prosperity, and resilience, inspiring not only its own citizens but also communities far and wide. As the new year dawned, Krakow stood transformed, a city where every street, every building, every public space resonated with the promise of peace and progress. The scars of the past, though forever remembered, had become stepping stones toward a future filled with hope. The community's commitment to rebuilding and nurturing their home had turned Krakow into a living testament to the power of unity and renewal. And so, on that bright New Year's Eve in 1982, as the final fireworks faded into the night and the voices of celebration echoed through every corner of the city, Krakow was reborn not as a city defined by its tragedies, but as a symbol of triumph over darkness. The journey from terror to renewal had been long and arduous, but it had proven that the human spirit, when united in hope, could overcome even the most unspeakable horrors. Today, Krakow continues to thrive as one of the safest, most prosperous cities in the region. Its streets, once haunted by the echoes of brutality, now echo with laughter, music, and the vibrant pulse of life. The legacy of those dark days serves as a solemn reminder of the price of terror, yet it also stands as a beacon of the enduring strength and resilience of its people. As every citizen, women, children, and men alike embraces the promise of this new era, Krakow shines as a symbol of peace, unity, and a future that is bright and secure. The memories of the past, painful as they may be, have been transformed into a source of inspiration, a reminder that no darkness is eternal when faced with the collective will to rebuild and renew. In the aftermath of unimaginable darkness, When every broken street and shattered dream in Krakow bore the scars of terror, a new dawn emerged, a dawn where the relentless force of justice and the unwavering spirit of a united community restored light to even the most forsaken corners of the city. The true crime stories we have explored have been brutal, unyielding accounts of cruelty that once defined the night. Yet today, as we stand at the threshold of renewal, we witness not just the downfall of monstrous perpetrators but the resurgence of hope and resilience that only a community bonded by shared suffering and determination can bring forth. For months, Krakow was gripped by the shadow of unspeakable horror. The notorious bloodied brotherhood Vladimir Drakov, Mordecai Volkov, and Nikolai Svarog wove a tapestry of violence across every alley and public square, leaving behind trails of blood, terror, and despair. Their acts, recounted in vivid detail through our true crime stories, painted a picture so grotesque that even the most hardened hearts trembled. Every cut, every scream, every droplet of blood that fell was a testament to the depravity lurking within the human soul. Yet, amid the chaos and carnage, the spirit of the people of Krakow remained unbroken. At 8 a.m. on August 25, 1981, as the first gentle rays of dawn broke through heavy clouds, a historic transformation began. The city, once choked by the stench of blood and the echoes of anguished cries, started to breathe again. Leaders and citizens, united by a deep resolve to reclaim their home, launched an unprecedented campaign to erase the remnants of terror. Under the clear guidance of Chief Inspector Helena Nowak and the determined leadership of Krakow's government, a comprehensive plan for restoration was set into motion. Public spaces were scrubbed clean, debris was removed with precision, and modern security systems were installed to prevent any return of such horror. In the main square, a venerable symbol of Krakow's storied past, the atmosphere shifted palpably. At 7 p.m. on September 25, 1981, thousands gathered for a ceremony that heralded the city's rebirth. Against the backdrop of a newly cleared square and under the nurturing shade of a grand tree of hope planted that day, the mayor proclaimed with fervor, "Tonight, we witness the rebirth of Krakow, a city that has transcended its painful past and now stands as a beacon of unity, security, and prosperity. Let this moment mark the beginning of an era where every citizen, especially our women and children, can live free from fear." These words resonated deeply, stirring a collective heartbeat that had long lain dormant beneath the weight of trauma. The celebration was not merely ceremonial, it was a resounding affirmation that even the most overwhelming darkness could be vanquished by the strength of a community determined to rise. Slowly, the streets once haunted by the memories of gruesome crimes began to echo with laughter and the joyful clamor of everyday life. Markets reopened, schools resumed their lessons, and neighborhoods that had been shrouded in fear now shone with the promise of a new beginning. Over the following weeks, the transformation of Krakow became a living, breathing reality. From 10 a.m. on August 26, 1981, engineering teams and laborers worked tirelessly to rebuild the main square and other affected areas. With the steady hum of construction machinery and the coordinated efforts of dedicated public servants, the cityscape gradually transformed from a mosaic of despair into a canvas of hope and renewal. Modern surveillance cameras, upgraded emergency networks, and increased police patrols ensured that no shadow of the past could ever threaten the safety of its citizens again. The revival was not only physical but also deeply emotional. The city's cultural institutions reopened their doors, offering spaces for art, music, and dialogue. A series of community programs were launched to provide psychological support for those traumatized by the previous reign of terror. In every classroom, community center, and public forum, the conversation was one of healing and unity. Krakow's citizens, women who had once hidden in the darkness and children who had cowered in fear, found themselves emerging with newfound strength and determination to reclaim their identity. On December 15, 1982, at 6 p.m., the Grand Square of Unity ceremony was held, a momentous occasion broadcast live across the nation. This celebration was a culmination of the city's arduous journey from despair to renewal. The mayor, flanked by Chief Inspector Nowak and other esteemed officials, addressed the gathered crowd with a message that was both a tribute to the past and a clarion call for the future. Today, we celebrate not merely the physical rebuilding of our beloved city but the restoration of our collective spirit. Krakow stands as a living testament to the power of unity, resilience, and unwavering hope. Our streets, once marred by terror, now promise a future of security, prosperity, and everlasting peace. These stirring declarations were met with overwhelming applause and the heartfelt embrace of a community that had finally begun to heal. Families reunited on the streets, neighbors joined hands, and the air filled with the sound of jubilant music and the laughter of children reclaiming their playgrounds. Krakow was no longer a city defined by its scars but a living symbol of triumph over darkness. As the months progressed, Krakow emerged as a beacon of progress. Infrastructure projects revitalized the historical districts while integrating modern amenities, ensuring that the city preserved its rich heritage while embracing the innovations of the future. Investments in education, healthcare, and local commerce catalyzed a wave of economic revival, transforming Krakow into a thriving hub of cultural and technological advancement. By early 1982, the city was officially recognized as one of the safest and most prosperous in the region. On January 20, 1982, during a solemn ceremony at the main square, state officials proudly announced the successful completion of the restoration projects. "We have rebuilt not only our physical surroundings but also our spirit," declared the mayor, his voice echoing with pride and conviction. Krakow now stands as a symbol of our unbreakable unity and our determination to forge a future free from the shadow of terror. The story of Krakow's recovery is not just about physical reconstruction, it is a narrative of emotional and spiritual rebirth. In every neighborhood, the resilience of the people, their unwavering commitment to justice, and the power of community have transformed the remnants of a brutal past into a foundation for a brighter tomorrow. Each public space that was once a silent witness to horror now vibrates with the energy of festivals, public gatherings, and a shared vision for a peaceful future. Now, as we bring this series of true crime stories to a close, we invite you to join the dialogue. We want to hear your thoughts, your reflections on the profound journey from terror to renewal. What lessons do these stories hold for you? How do you interpret the interplay between darkness and light, between the horrors of the past and the hope of the future? Your insights are invaluable, not only to us but to all who seek to understand the complex tapestry of human nature. Before we sign off, please take a moment to subscribe to Inside the Criminal World and click the notification bell. Your single click ensures that you never miss our latest deep dives into the realm of true crime stories, a realm where every narrative, no matter how gruesome, carries the seed of redemption and the promise that justice will always prevail. Thank you for being part of this journey. The truth may be dark and often unspeakable, but it is in confronting that darkness that we discover the incredible strength of our collective spirit. Krakow's story is a powerful reminder that, despite the deepest scars, hope can rise from the ashes and light will always emerge to guide us toward a brighter, safer future.